And record. Very good, thank you. So awesome to be married to the producer. Well, welcome to StoryPower TV. I want to say thank you for being here again today. We are in the same process that we always are. With StoryPower TV, it's all about who is Jesus to you and what impact has he had in your life. And I have a couple with me today. Leslie and Stewart they've been through it. They have seen some of the worst of humanity and some of the best moments in life as well. They're parents of college-aged kids, so they're getting to see a whole new side of life at this point as well. But they have walked in that country style of life, in that basic, simple life, and in the big city as well. And so what does life look like through the lens of someone who doesn't live in Manhattan? You're going to hear some of that today. What does life look like through the lens of someone who's on the front lines, literally dealing with the worst of humanity and the best of humanity? You're going to hear some of that today. And what does it look like to be a parent in this generation, raising kids with everything our kids are bombarded with? You're going to hear some of that today. So I'm glad that you're here. You've chosen just the right show for you. I know that God has something specific to say to you through this conversation, and I really hope that you'll stay tuned for every second of it. Again, I'm J Loren Norris with StoryPower TV, and I want to welcome our guest. Leslie, thank you for coming.
Yes.
Stuart, thank you so much for being here, sir.
Absolutely.
Appreciate you. Hey, you didn't have a whole lot of a drive through the country to get here like our last guest did, but we're very glad that you're here today.
Thank you.
So how long have the two of you been married?
We just celebrated 20 years.
20 years.
This
Wow.
last December.
Wow.
Pearl Harbor Day.
Pearl Harbor. That's an easy one to remember,
A
right?
date that will live in infamy.
For more than one reason now,
Yes.
right?
Yeah.
Well, and it's unique because it's also her mom's birthday.
Yeah.
So it I got lucky. I got the anniversary and the mother-in-law's birthday all in one day.
So you can't mess that up. 'Cause-
Exactly.
No, he can never forget either.
And you love history too, if I'm not
Yes,
mistaken. So
absolutely.
yeah, that makes it even easier to remember.
Yeah.
Very good. So tell me a little bit about what your journey's been like over the last 4 or 5 years as the world has kind of been through some turmoil. You're a law enforcement officer for how many years?
22.
22.
22 years.
So you married a cop, Leslie?
Yes, I did.
What were you thinking?
I ask myself that every day. Every day I ask myself that. Yeah, it's been a journey. But I knew it was a calling, and we had that conversation before we ever got married, and he made me fully aware of what that was going to look like and how there would be great days and there would be very meek and grim days, and whether or not I was ready for that walk, and I was. So
I don't think everybody is. My wife and I did pre-marriage counseling for a few years, and there was a particular couple. She had been raised in a church home. Her parents had a long marriage, and then it ended in a disastrous affair and collapse. And so her life was really a mess. And we were doing their counseling. She was going to marry an ICE officer. And I'm like, this is not just your average everyday patrol officer. This is a guy who's got a whole different kind of life, and every day he has a target on his back by people with money to do the job of getting rid of him, and the will to do it, and enough hatred to do it. And I said, if we fast forward 5 years, what does life look like? She said, well, I can see coming home, I'll have dinner ready when he walks through the door. And I'm like, when was the last time you walked through the door at dinner time? He's like, I don't think I've ever walked through the door at dinner time. I said, do you see that change? And she said, well, I think after we get married, he'll want to settle down and maybe find a better job. No. I said, he doesn't have a job. She said, well, yeah, he does. He's a cop. I said, that's not a job. Yeah. That's a lifestyle.
Yes,
that's a calling. That's a career. That's a whole different thing.
Yeah.
And I don't think she got that at all. So obviously you did.
Yes.
And you've been through this journey now for a minute.
Yeah. Stuart and I knew each other in high school. We dated briefly, and went off and did our own thing in life, and both actually went to college in the same town at opposing universities or rivalry universities, and never ran back into each other that entire time, and which I always found very ironic. And then, I just happened to be in Abilene one weekend, and we ran into each other, and sparks flew, and I knew what type of person he was, and I knew his heart, and I was always very impressed and intrigued with his intelligence and his mind, and I just knew he was a good person. And so it didn't really matter to me, what he wanted to do within law enforcement, I just knew he was going to be great at it because I knew how smart he was and I knew his heart, and so I knew he'd be successful, and I wanted to be a part of that journey.
Very good. So how long have you been a person of faith?
I would say, I really came and asked Jesus into my life around the age of 12 or 13. I grew up in a very religious environment and home, and so that's been a huge adjustment for me as my faith and my walk has grown so much stronger as I got older and became more spiritual rather than religious. And but I would probably say around the age of 12 or 13 is when I really started that conversation with God and opened that up.
And how about you?
Oh, for me, I'm going to say it's probably more than after we actually met. I grew up in a very religious home. My grandfather was a Presbyterian minister. My uncle was a Presbyterian minister. My great-grandfather was a Presbyterian minister. So we were always at church. Sunday you went to church, and it was the place to be. But growing up in high school and going through that, to me, it became more of just a place to go. And I knew the understanding, but it was just a place to be. And went to college, sowed my oats, went way the direction I shouldn't have gone. And then, when we got together, it was one of the things that she said was, we need to find a church home. And one of the first things we did after getting married was we went to a class there at Southern Hills in Abilene called His Needs, Her Needs. And going through that started to develop more in me of what God says I need to be, not only as a father, but also as a husband and the leader of my house. And then, just continuing on down that path was probably the best for me. And, I had my dark time where I pretty much shunned God and didn't want a thing to do with him and blamed him for how I felt.
Wow.
So, I say I hit it in my 20s, but it was probably, the shooting was in 2009, so it was probably 2016 or 17 when I finally started to come out that we got in a church home there in Weatherford with a pastor who just spoke it like it is. And every time you walked out of that service, you thought he was talking specifically to me.
Wow.
And that was when I really, really got my understanding and really found my faith.
So what's it been like raising kids in this era of time?
A nightmare. From my view, from my aspect of it and what I do, I see so much that's just tearing at those kids every day, day in and day out. When I was over the school resource officers, you read some of their reports and you just see what's coming at them every day. And the one common denominator is most of them are from single family homes.
Wow.
They don't have that core value of what a family's supposed to be, and when you don't have that, you just do what you want.
I think for us too, it was always very important for us we understood that our kids were only loaned to us. They're only ours for a certain amount of time. And so, God entrusted us to be a living example to them, and we wanted to raise them in an environment, whether it was school or church home, to seek God in everything, and seek God in everything. And so we have really worked hard at that, to instill that in our kids, and to live by faith and not fear. And this world just continually tries to put fear in the kids. And so we've really tried to drive home with them in everything that they do to seek God for their direction and to pray about it. We tell our kids all the time, pray about it. Have you prayed about it?
Don't ask me until you ask.
Right.
That's
well,
right.
and it's funny, with Rylan being at Tech, he texted his mom a workout shirt here not too long ago, and it's a faith-based workout shirt that he wants to wear when he goes and works out, so he can spread his message in the gym.
He said, Mom, it's a conversation starter.
I bet.
Yeah.
Especially these days, because
Yeah.
You can be ostracized for that
But
really fast.
It's been difficult. It's hard. When you are working so hard to raise your kids, and teach them to trust God and to go to God, and everything around them is telling them the opposite.
Right.
It's extremely difficult.
Pulling them away.
Well, and you feel like it's not just a battle for their mind and their attention, which it obviously is, but it's a battle for their soul.
That's
Absolutely.
right.
You know, their mind, will, and emotions are being drawn away. And it's not just a matter of saying, we want you to be distracted by or called away to, or, hey, look at this over here. It's an intentional, you know, there were actually statements from some of the organizations over the last couple of years that said, we intend to destroy the nuclear family. And like you said, a lot of the problems we see, whether it's in the streets or it's in the schools, a lot of those problems are stemmed from single-parent families.
Absolutely.
I grew up the only son of a single mom. I had my own keys to the house, my own keys to the car at 13 years old. I drove without a license because I had a job after school. I didn't have a choice.
Yeah.
And so, you know, living through that life and being able to look back on it now and see young people who are like, I'm like, so what would your dad say about that? I don't know. I haven't seen him in my lifetime. You know, there is no father influence in the home. And as much as I love my mom, I grew all the way to my young adulthood. I was in the Air Force when I read Bringing Up Boys by James Dobson, Wild at Heart by John Eldredge, and Becoming a Person of Influence by John Maxwell, all in about a month's period of time. And it completely changed the who that I am.
Yeah.
And as much as I love my mom and she did a phenomenal job, mom can't dad.
That's right.
Mom just can't dad.
Yeah. Yeah. So
So
true.
one of our good friends, a couple that we're on the same walk with, gifted me Wild at Heart.
Did you cry?
I have in parts of it. It's hard not to.
I don't know anybody who got through chapter 3 without
just
crying
hits
like a
you.
baby. I'm
It
like, if
hits
you
you.
didn't read it.
Absolutely. It hits you.
It does. And it really, it's that part that you challenge. There's a young man that's almost 20 years old. He ran into our boys in Life High School years back, and they started hanging out together. His dad's gone. His stepdad or his granddad's now gone. There's no male influence in his life. And he's helped us move and help us set up the studio and all that kind of stuff. And so when we were putting all the books on the bookshelf, I'm like, I have an extra copy of Wild at Heart. You should take that. And he's like, you don't want to sell it? I'm like, no, I don't want to sell it. I'm going to give it to you. And so I gave him 3 books that day. One is about how to make money. One was my first book that was written in 2011. And then Wild at Heart.
Yeah.
And he messaged me the other day. He said, I'm on chapter 4 and I'm dyslexic. I don't read. I'm like, so how'd you get to chapter 4? He said, very slowly. But he said it's already making me really think about who I am in this world. And I'm like, good.
Yeah.
Because it really will change your
challenges you.
foundation. And,
Absolutely.
And it's sad that when dad's gone from the home and mom is doing everything she can just to hold her ground, authority is a hard thing to find.
Yeah.
When we come back from the break, I'd love to hear, Leslie, from your perspective, that dark journey that Stewart went through and your daughter went through that in that season with him and really kind of get your perspective on that.
Okay.
Okay, you can stop the live stream. Everybody sound okay? Just push it once.
The first time when he was raising his arm, the mic was.
Fuzzy.
Scrappy.
Yeah.
Be still.
Is it all good now?
It's good now. I am hearing something.
What are you hearing?
Is it my bracelets?
Mm-mm.
I caught myself
Are you
doing
hearing a
that.
buzz? Are you hearing a
No.
click? Are you hearing a cow?
I think it's outside. At first I thought it was a chair rocking.
Oh, his chair makes noise because that's the one Jesse forgot to tighten. Wiggle, yeah.
I have a hard time sitting still.
And he talks with his hands,
Yeah.
big time.
Should we trade
I mean, I
the
do
chair?
too. I do too. But
No, it's all right.
Okay.
I'll try to be still. I'll be robotic.
no doubt.
All right. Welcome back to StoryPower TV. I hope you guys are having a great time with this interview. This conversation with Stewart and Leslie is really, I mean, this is brass tacks. This is right down to the road of what does it look like when Jesus is involved in your life. And maybe you've seen some of the videos of George Floyd and what happened there, and it gives rise to the emotion that cops are bad. And there was a whole push for a couple of years in our country to defund the police, get rid of law enforcement, completely abolish the work that they do because some cops are bad. But I want you to have a moment to glimpse through the eyes of someone who's on the other side of that equation and what that's like. And so, Leslie, I want to hear what it was like for you the day that you got the call that he had to do the thing that nobody ever wants to do.
I don't know that I've ever really talked about this out loud. yeah, it was the middle of the night, and the phone rang. And of course, being a law enforcement officer's wife, you know, when the phone rings in the middle of the night on a night shift, it's never good. And we had just recently moved to Weatherford, had not been there maybe 2 or 3 years. And I answered the phone, and I just remember the first words out of his mouth were, I'm okay, but there's been a shooting. And I just remember going silent. You know, I don't remember a whole lot other than those words, knowing that he was okay. I didn't know a lot of the details. He just said, I'm going to be here a while. So he said, I didn't want you to be alarmed when you woke up, and I wasn't home off my shift. And, you know, to be honest, I didn't even really understand in that moment what was about to transpire. I don't think anybody does. And how that split second would literally affect the next 5 or 6 years of our life. It was, you know, I don't even know how to put it into words, really. It just really changed the course of where I thought we were headed, and took us off the path for a while. And you know, everything afterwards, of course, you know, anytime a shooting like that happens, they're always put on a leave, a paid leave. And so, you know, we had some time there at the house together, which I thought was great. You know, you cherish those moments.
Right.
And that sounds strange, but you know, when you have a schedule like they have, anytime they have off, you enjoy. But I didn't realize the magnitude of that moment and how it was about to affect him. And, you know, fast forward, everything seemed to be fine. And probably about a year afterwards, I really noticed that he was becoming a shell of a person. I noticed just a lack of involvement, a lack of communication. He basically was going through the motions.
He was home, but he wasn't there.
He was home. He was home, but he wasn't there. And, you know, I would ask him, I would talk to him, I'm fine, I'm good, everything's great, don't worry about it, I'm good, you know. And I remember him coming in, and he said, I had a very interesting conversation today with one of my lieutenants. I believe he was a lieutenant at the time, and he said he's extremely concerned. And I said, okay, what does that mean? You know, or do we still have a job? I mean, are you employed? Like, what should I be preparing for? And they had basically looked back at his numbers and his you know, how he was performing within his role, and he wasn't. And I knew he wasn't performing at home either. And I said, I think we're in trouble. And I had noticed too that his drinking had really taken a strong left. It wasn't just a social drink here and there, or you know, a special event drink, or however you want to say that. It was more consistent.
It wasn't even casual.
It wasn't casual anymore. And what I didn't realize is that he was drinking before I got up. So he would come in off his shift.
Wow.
And he was drinking in order to go to sleep so that he wouldn't dream. And I had no idea. He hid it very, very well. And we came down to Granbury on a trip with several couples, and had, you know, we were having a great time, and everybody decided to jump in and go swimming that night. We had a house on the water, and I knew he had had too much to drink, and he stepped off the side of the dock and came within inches of a rock wall with his head.
Wow.
And the next morning, I just told him, I said, you choose. You choose the alcohol, or you choose me and the kids. Because I was raised around an alcoholic grandfather. My brother is an alcoholic. And I said, I didn't choose to be married to one too. And that was really the turning point. I think when he realized I could lose my marriage over this, I could lose my job over this, I could lose everything I've worked for. Something's got to be addressed. Something's wrong. And so the counseling began, and so many demons were revealed and doors opened and covers pulled back, and we had to really go through some tough, dark times to get to the other side.
Tell me what that was like as a mother, watching your daughter go through that.
Single parent.
I was a single parent, and I used to tell him, in the heat of arguments or just strong discussions, I didn't get married to be single. I felt like I was on an island all by myself, and what I didn't realize is that Rachel and he share such a strong bond, and she was feeling everything he was feeling, and she was experiencing so much fear. She knew he was hurting. She knew, what a risk he took every time he walked out that door, and there was always that thought in the back of her head that he might not walk back through it. And especially, knowing that he had been involved in a shooting and how close he came to being on the other end of that bullet. And she was internalizing a lot at that time, and we did not realize that.
Now, you told me you carried something around. Did Rachel know about that?
No.
No.
Leslie didn't know about that until probably a year or two ago.
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
I kept that secret.
Mm-hmm.
What was that revelation like for you?
Gut-wrenching. Gut-wrenching to know that something so large, so big, could have taken him from me and our kids. And the relationship that we have and had and have built, and knowing how much he loves his children, that it was that big that he felt like he couldn't face it.
Tell us about that decision.
Not a whole lot about it. I mean, I was at the lowest of the lows, and my thought process was, I'm putting my family through this. They'd be better off without me here. And you fight those demons day in and day out, and in being in law enforcement, you see it day in and day out, and it just builds on you and builds on you and builds on you and builds on you, and there's no way to get rid of it, because I didn't want to go home and start in on the wife and the kids, so I just internalized it, and the more I internalized it, the worse it got. Being mad at God, the worse it got, because I blamed him for putting me where I was at. And when you blame him, it eats at you. And it got to the point, there were a few times it was close, but I just never got the final courage to pull the trigger.
What have you done with that round since then?
Round sits on a shelf in my closet. And for me, it's that daily reminder of, you were once that person.
And it's always one decision away.
And it's always one decision away.
It really is amazing to me when you hear people talk about others who have contemplated suicide. They have this Pollyanna view of, well, just get over it, or just move beyond it, or nothing can really be that bad. And as grown adults, we deal with that self-esteem and that self-loathing and that self-hatred, and what have I done wrong, and who have I hurt, and how could I have undone it, and wouldn't they be better off without me? But when we back that up 15 years and we think of a 12-year-old who's looking at life, and we realize their coping mechanisms, the tools they have to deal with, are extremely limited by comparison, and that self-loathing at that level is a whole nother ballgame. Their ability to undo what they feel like has been the most tragic thing is non-existent. Fast forwarding 5-6 years now, you said 2009 was when it happened. 5 or 6 years was the journey of nearly ending it, et cetera, et cetera. Where is that now?
For me, it was finally a culmination of my lieutenant at the time saying, "You're having a problem," and going home and having that conversation with Leslie. And there was a little bit of, "I told you this has been going on," conversation.
I had
that
to
was
get
had.
that in there.
But
Wouldn't be a good wife if you
No.
didn't.
I think one of the big key turning points was after that weekend in Granbury, we had just joined our church in Weatherford, and as part of that process got rebaptized. So it was kind of like a new,
Spiritual awakening.
yes,
Yep.
and starting that new path with God. In addition to that, I went to a seminar for officers that have been involved in shootings. And that one seminar I will credit to changing my whole attitude.
You remember the name of the seminar?
It was a post-critical incident seminar.
Okay.
And I went down and they did EMDR.
Yeah.
And, you know, we all call it voodoo. Because, I mean, it's just, it's mind-blowing what it does.
It seems that way, but it is the way God wired you.
Yeah, it lifted that cloud.
Yeah.
And since then, you know, my path has been where it needs to be. And with the church home we had there in Weatherford with Brian, and now with Eugene, where we're at in Jacksboro, you know, just having those strong Christian leaders who aren't afraid to tell you how it is.
Yeah.
The Bible says this. It doesn't say what we want it to say. It says this. And instilling that in us. And really, you know, I credit a lot right now to Eugene in teaching me things that I wasn't taught as a kid on how to be the father to your children, how to be the husband to your wife, how to be the leader of your family. And it's all biblical.
We've realized, though, that, you know, if it had not been for that lieutenant recognizing Stewart slipping, he would have never gone to that seminar. And had he not gone to that seminar, I might not have gotten my husband back. I might have lost my husband completely. And then finding the church home there in Weatherford with Greenwood and being so encouraged and so blessed by that pastor, and then moving to Jacksboro and now being so enrooted in that church home and having Eugene bless us the way he has. And, you know, God has placed people in our life the entire time to help us come through to the other side. And I'll never forget, our pastor in Weatherford told us, he said, "I know you're in a very dark place right now," but he said, when you and Stewart, he said, and I say when you get to the other side of this, you're going to have one incredible story to tell.
Yeah.
And he said, and you will. He said, I'm speaking that over you right now. And I'm so thankful. I mean, the entire time that was happening, I just prayed. I prayed all the time. God, please give me my husband back. Please don't let me lose my marriage. Please let him look at these children and wake up, you know. And I surrendered. I'm a very strong type A person, and for me to surrender is huge, but I knew I could not do it without God. And I handed it over to him and said, take it. And, you know, I'm so grateful that I have that relationship with God and that he has been the one that has just been the glue that has held us together.
How's Rachel's relationship now with you and with God?
Well, with me, it's the same it's always been. I mean, we are like two peas in a pod. I mean, it's funny. She drives my Jeep now, and I don't have a car at the house. So when I'm off and I need to go somewhere, or if she's going, I jump in the passenger seat and here we go. So, you know, the relationship I have with her is exceptional. And her path, I mean, she is her own person. She has a very unique view on her faith. And she feels that she has that relationship, and that relationship is between her and her God and her and Jesus. And she's going to go the path that she wants to go because that's the one he's leading her down.
And her strength and her resilience.
Absolutely.
Is
exceptional.
I've been through a lot in my life, and I say I'm a very strong person, but she has me beat hands down. she's just committed to going to University of Tennessee in Knoxville in the
Wow.
fall. And somebody asked me the other day, they said, aren't you worried? Aren't you concerned? Are you getting sad? And I said, if it were anyone else but
I'm
Rachel, I would.
I'm worried about the university.
Yeah, exactly.
I'm
Exactly.
gonna have to make friends with the police chiefs
Yeah.
up there when we go.
But if anybody could do it, she will do it, and she will do it exceptionally well.
And your son's a sophomore at Tech, right?
Yes.
Almost a junior, yes.
What's his focus?
Chemical engineering. Yeah.
Like oil field type stuff?
I don't know that he has designated what he specifically wants to do. He just knows he loves chemistry and he loves to build. And so it's just been a perfect fit for him.
Good thing he likes math.
Yes.
Yes.
I don't.
absolutely.
Stuart was a chemistry major. I don't think with that brain. So I'm more the English and history.
So what do you think is next? I mean, as you continue this journey, you're now on the lighter side of the darkness. You're seeing your kids go off. You're engaged in your church. Do you feel like God's calling you to do something to help couples who are struggling or have gone through the same thing, or is that?
I've always said, this story is too untold. People do not really understand. They certainly can't understand what it is like to be in law enforcement in this day and age.
Right.
There is no word that can describe it. And they also don't understand what it's like to be married to it. And if God put us on this earth and put us, allowed us to go through all of this and come through to the other side, and we can help others make it through to their other side, then that's what we've been called to do, and we're willing to do that. And
It would be a very unique ministry for sure.
yes.
Well, and I look at too, when I came into law enforcement, it was 2001, right after 9/11.
All right.
Everybody loved cops. Everybody loved the firemen. And we had that support, and it was nonstop. And to the point where it is now, where everybody still loves the firemen, but they hate cops. So, the pendulum swing over
Right.
that career. And I know it's been hard on Leslie, and that's been hard on the kids. They see it blasted in the media every day. And there's been on occasion where one of the kids at school pops off to Rachel about cops. And she stands up for me. One of her, was it the FBLA contests where she and two of her friends did a Back the Blue presentation that I was all for. I thought it was great. With the current climate that we were in, I didn't think it would get out of district, and they went all the way to state and did well at state.
Wow.
So, there's those groups out there that are still there, but just the constant beating day in and day out, that takes a toll on the family.
It really affects the entire family. And we've watched our children, like you said, Rachel at school, and there's been things that have been said on social media in regards to our children, and whether it be on race or whether it be on him being a police officer, it affects the entire family.
And I can only imagine what that was like in the days and weeks immediately surrounding the event, because you still got to go back to school, you still got to show up at work, you're still in the community, the victim was in the community.
Yeah.
So that's a whole different ball
Dynamic,
of wax, so to
absolutely.
speak.
Yeah, absolutely.
So what would be your advice for those who are considering a career in law enforcement right now, considering being a spouse of someone in law enforcement and raising a family in this generation? What would you say?
From my viewpoint, first and foremost, you've got to have that strong faith, and you've got to have that strong support from home. I'm a firm believer if it wasn't for the support I got at home, I definitely wouldn't be here today. At the same time, you've got to have a thick skin, and you've got to have great understanding, because you're going to go to work every day, and I still do it. I go to work every day and I'm there for 10 hours, and I'll call or text her maybe once or twice. You've got to have that communication at home. And realize that while you're off having fun and driving 90 miles an hour with your hair on fire, chasing the bad guys, your wife's at home, your kids are at home, they're watching it on TV saying, oh my God, I hope that's not my husband, or I hope that's not dad. And understand that emotion.
Yeah. And communication, like you said,
Mm-hmm.
communication is key. We talked about it so much when we were dating. I knew what I was walking into. I knew what I was stepping off in. And like I said, I'm a very strong person, but you have to have that strength. You have to have that faith. You have to have trust, lots of trust, and know that that's that person's calling, and you either want to be a part of the calling or you don't. But for me, I think communication has been such a huge key to us making it through in our faith.
Very good. I appreciate the two of you taking time to come today and share. I mean, like you said, this could be a mini series.
Yeah.
So what we've talked about today has just been a fraction of the story, but I very much appreciate you taking the time to do that and share what's on your heart and how that journey, even just that microcosm, was in your life. And I appreciate your faith and I appreciate your service.
Thank you.
I want to thank you again for watching StoryPower TV, for being a part of what we're doing here. Share these stories, share them with everybody that you know, because Jesus does get involved in the very nitty-gritty of life. He knew that the rock wall was that close to the pier. He knew how many drinks had been had. He knew that a wife that was standing by her husband would bring that to a crucible to say, this is the end of the rope, this is the bottom of the barrel, you're going to have to decide. But God knew that for the thief on the cross. He wasn't baptized. He didn't go through catechism. He was never trained in theology. I don't think he even said the sinner's prayer. But that day he recognized Jesus Christ as Lord and Savior, and eternity was paid for him, just like it has been for you. Your life doesn't have to be a story of tragedy for the hope of Christ to make a difference. He will. He wants to. He loves you that much. Take the time. If you don't know anybody to ask, send me an email. I'd love to hear from you. Loren@JLorenNorris.com. But share this story with other people who are asking the same question: who is Jesus to me, and why does he matter in my life? I'm J Loren Norris with StoryPower TV. Have a blessed day. All right. Great job. Thank you. I was thinking we should have got her a Kleenex. We got one for Liz because we knew we were going to talk about her husband. But
I think the only time we've ever really talked about it was in counseling, when we went through that. So,
And I think one of the biggest things for me is that got me back was, you always hear the saying that if God brings you to it, he'll get you through it. Leslie says it all the time.
right.
And I've always heard that, well, God's not going to give you too much that you can't handle.
no, he
And I
will.
don't believe in that. And this proves that to me is God gave me too much to handle
Yeah.
so that I would turn to him.
Yeah, when he does that, he's just ensuring that it's more than we can handle, not more than he can
Right.
handle.
Yeah. I always think about the people he chose in the Bible to do the unthinkable. They were so under-equipped, but he equipped them.
Yeah.
And
Moses is like, are you
Yeah.
you sure that I'm the guy that's supposed to talk?
Yeah, exactly. So he's given us the tools, and
And I've used my lessons learned. We had a shooting Christmas Eve. I spent all day. I was on call Christmas week, and I got a call at 8 o'clock Christmas morning, and I didn't get home till 8 o'clock that night. I
Wow.
spent all day Christmas Eve. I had 3 officers involved, and I see them every day, and I ask them every day because I don't want them to get to where I was.
yeah.
So I've continued to use my lessons learned to try and help others.
When he graduated from the Northwest School of Command, which is a huge accomplishment, the lieutenant who identified he was having a problem was there with the command staff. They came to support him in his graduation. And Chris is a very introverted personality and very quiet, very hard to talk to. And I'm like, bleh. I'm just like, I'm a lot. And I just walked over to him and I said, I want to thank you because God used you as a vessel to save my husband. And I'm not sure I would still have my marriage or the father of my children had it not been for you. And I said, I don't even think you really realize that, but I realize it. And I want you to know that I realize it. And he awkwardly was like, okay, thanks, And I was like, but I needed that. I needed to thank him for being that person.
Well, it's amazing too, because sometimes you run into those people. It's their natural bent to help.
Yeah.
but they have no idea the magnitude
No.
of the difference that they're making. I mean, they're the one sand dollar kind of person, or the pebble in the pond, and you're like,
God
And
uses
he-
the most
yeah, no,
unlikely
he
people.
didn't. He had no
He had
clue.
no clue.
And I actually went into his office the following week because we had challenge coins made up for our class that graduated. And I gave him a coin and I said, "This is for you," and I told him why.
Mm-hmm.
And then it clicked with what Leslie had told him.
Yeah, I think he just thought I was crazy.
there's a book up here by Jack Canfield called Success Principles, and in that he tells the story of a guy who had committed suicide, and there was a sticky note on the inside of the door of his apartment. The paint around the outside of that sticky note was faded. The sticky note was faded to another color. And it was all dusty, but on the sticky note it said, "If one person says hello to me today, I won't jump." Now think what that means, though, that 5 years of carrying around that
Yeah.
one round.
Yeah.
How many years did one person step out like, "Hey, how are you today?" And that was enough for life to continue.
Yeah.
But on that day, nobody cared. Well, that's a profound thought
Yeah.
when you think you could have saved someone's father, grandfather, uncle's life
Yeah.
with a simple hello. But we get so distracted, we stare at our phones and we forget about other humans around us. And you know, Chris was one of those guys who said, I'm not going to sit back and watch. I see the disaster coming. I'm going to do something about it.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah. Thank you
Shouldn't
for
we all be that
allowing
kind of
us to
people?
do this. I appreciate it.
Thank you. I appreciate you taking the time to do it.
Yeah.
We'll do it some more.
Could you hear my stomach growling? I'm so sorry.
I heard once.
I try to fast, and I'm like, not now. Like, not now. We'll have babes in a minute.
There you go. Right around the corner.
Yes.
I think we might be having babes. I don't know.
I don't know. Have you heard from Joshua yet?
No.
Okay.
I don't know if it's.
Because we're all on Do Not Disturb. You can stop recording now.